morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of our InfinitTech Podcast Series. Today, we're actually going to be diving into one of the most demanded topics from you guys, our audience, which is on personal finance and financial literacy. And today with us, we have a very familiar face, Dr. Seng, financial lecturer at RMIT University Vietnam. So, Dr. Seng, welcome to our show.
Hey guys. Nice to meet you guys, everyone. Nice setup. I especially like my Fintech Club mug with my face on it as well. So yeah, good to be here. Thanks for having me. Look forward to the conversation. I just spilled water all over myself, but yeah, fine, cool.
It's great to have you. So to begin with, let's start with what is your definition of personal finance?
I think personal finance is quite to an extent, personal finance to me anyway is a skill that everyone should kind of possess, and it's all about managing your own wealth, managing the growth of that wealth, and managing, say, for example, key things like spending, budgeting, saving. So it's core knowledge that I think everyone should have in terms of how you manage your own finances. So yeah, that to me would be what I would class as personal finance.
So why does it matter for, university student like me and maybe the majority of our audience as well? Why is personal finance a skill that you should have?
Well, I think personal finance is a skill not only for university students. I mean, to an extent, everyone should have, personal financial skills. I mean, moving all the way from, let's say, for example, a university student or even a high school student, all the way up to, like, let's say, a high wealth individual, billions in net worth. Everyone kind of needs that personal financial management, personal wealth management. I mean, for university students, obviously, maybe you might argue that it might be a bit more important only because you're on the cusp of graduating. So you've gone from this really nice, controlled, safe environment of university, into the wide working world. And essentially, you're going to start working. You're going to basically start earning your own keep. You're going to maybe start living away from home. You're going to be maybe starting your own family or considering starting your own family. So yeah, you're at that point whereby you're transitioning from, a university lifestyle, which is still very safe, very, 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 I suppose, protected, into progressing into the wide, evil, working world, whereby you have to manage all this yourselves, really. You're going to be thinking about making large financial decisions like, should I buy a house? Or, what do I invest in? Because I'm going to be working for the next 40, 50, 60 years. What am I going to end up with? Will I have any social protection when I retire? So these are decisions that you're going to have to be making once you start working, and that's at that point in time university students transitioning into the work life.
Can you maybe share with us some of the examples on how having in-depth or a lot of experience with personal finance could actually help a student? Maybe perhaps a personal example of when you transition from a university student to actually stepping into the real world. What are some of the decisions that you've made that
Yeah, I mean, I suppose maybe. So one of the things that I found out the hard way was trying to find out what policies were implemented within the workplace for, let's say, for example, future planning. So when I first got my first job, which was in the UK, and that was with a university, I mean, I had a bit of a background in personal finance. I taught it a few times. And I was like, okay, I was aware that, when I start working, I'll have a pension fund. So the university is going to contribute to a pension fund. Part of my salary is going to be taken and it's going to be put into this fund that I will technically never see. So I was given a choice. So they go, hey, do you want to, it's an opt-out scheme. So fundamentally, when you first join a university and you sign your contract, your labor contract, they will automatically take funds out every month. If you don't want them to take funds out, you have to actually write explicitly to them saying, I don't want you to deduct this amount of money from my salary every month. I like it to be paid. So that was one of the key decisions going, do I want to keep, let's say, $400 of my salary every month? Or am I willing to give up $400 of my salary to put into this fund, which I technically never get to see until the age of like 65. So I was about 26 then, and I was like, $400 every month is quite nice. I could go out and have a good time with my friends. Or I save it, I invest it, and it grows for the next 40, 50 years. So that was a key decision, and it's actually quite a tough decision. So the first inclination was that I was like, no, I want the $400. And I was like, I took the $400 for about 6 months, and I took the money into my salary. And then what I discovered a bit later on as I did a bit of research was that these pension contributions are actually quite vital, because if you take, let's say, $400 a month and you compound it every month for the next 40, 50 years, it's a lot of money. And I was thinking as well, as like, what am I going to do with $400 every month? I could spend it, but at the end of 60 years, so it's a bit of a disconnect. And I think that idea of financial literacy is quite important, being able to see the long term when it comes to such planning events. It's actually quite tough because it's such a large period. You know, what are you going to do in 40 years time? Things could change dramatically over 40 years. So yeah, that long-term perspective is quite important.
Right. And how can students like actually think about that and have that change their behaviors? You know, students, they have a lot of habits, and they hear all these things all the time, like, hey, you gotta save up, you gotta, you know, exactly in the same situation as you, but most of the time they don't actually do it. And I find myself in a pretty similar situation. So what are some ways that, you know, students can actually change their ways and change their habits so that they could start thinking about the long terms?
I think to an extent it's driven socially, at least from my perspective. So, you know, when you're young, you know, things are provided to you. Parents, you know, your parents give you your parents give you shelter, your parents give you allowance, so on and so forth. At least my parents did. And I know that there are individuals in situations where they don't have that benefit. But I think for myself anyway, I've always had that, you know, nice close-knit family, and my parents have always been very supportive of everything. And I suppose for a lot of students that could be the scenario. And as you transition away from that, you have to make a lot of planning. Obviously, you know, you can't be expected to suddenly become the new responsible adult overnight. It takes time to kind of transition into that. But also hanging out or being very mindful of this, and being very mindful that, life, you know, you have to think about the longer term picture. Think about, you know, where your finances are going to be 40, 50, 60 years from now. Think about, let's say, for example, if you're going to start a family, think about, okay, you know, how am I going to plan for my dependents when you have kids, when you have, let's say, a spouse. Yeah, it's a bit of an attitude shift, and to an extent, I think it's part of the process of growing up. You're going to make mistakes in terms of your planning. You're going to be spending more than you have at some point in time. I mean, some individuals are more conscientious than others, but at some point in time, everyone's going to spend. Everyone's going to blow their money on something useless, like, I don't know, Pokemon cards. Although Pokemon cards are quite a good investment, but you know, you're going to buy some useless crap every now and then, and you know, but it's a bit of a I think a bit of a mindset shift. Now, not everyone will completely shift over to that mindset, but hopefully some notion of understanding for financial planning would be helpful. I mean, yeah, it's a transitional thing, at least for most people.
Right. So let's talk about, how do you actually manage your personal finance? What are some practical steps that, well, not just any university student, but anybody could take to manage their personal finance, manage their money, and what are some advice that you would give?
Oh God. So I'm gonna be quite, I suppose, I'm quite pedantic, or rather, I can be quite pedantic with finances, being a bit of a finance lecturer, although I'm not the best at it. I think my brother does a better job at managing his finances than I do. But I think simple stuff like setting up a spreadsheet, you know, trying to basically find out what are your outgoings and what are your incomings. I think that's a good place to kind of start. So having a baseline picture of how much you have in terms of, or how much you're spending every month, is actually quite a good place to kind of begin your journey in terms of understanding what your spending patterns are like, how your spending patterns are going to change, and to an extent, what are your objectives? And you know, these. So for example, I've got my simple spreadsheet, and within that spreadsheet, it's actually a very simple spreadsheet, by the way. It's just basically listing things that I spend on every month. For example, rent, utilities, phone bill, internet, and you know, maybe $100 allocated to like a night out, or you know, so some drinks, or to hang out with friends. But and it's a simple spreadsheet that plus minus, and that's about it. But fundamentally, what happens within the spreadsheet is that I'm then able to an extent, set maybe short to medium term objectives. So let's say I want to go traveling to America. I know I can do a bit of a quick cost analysis going, okay, if I want to stay in this hotel, if I want to go to these places, it might cost me, let's say, $3,000 to $5,000 plus flight tickets, hotels, and everything. And from there, I can then plan within my daily or within my monthly budget going, this is how much I save every month. If I do this for the next, let's say, 3 months, then this is what I get. And from there, I can actually plan even more trips. So if I save more, I can plan other trips around that. And yeah, and in between there as well, it's also quite cool because what I can then do is that, whatever I don't spend, I then have a platform for essentially savings or investments. So I could actually go, hey, what's that investments? I forget. Dollar indexing, which is quite cool, whereby every month, regardless of what transpires, you take a proportion of your savings and you put it into, let's say, an investment. So you could be, right, I save $500 every month. Every month I'll take $100 and I'll put it to Bitcoin, or I'll take $100 and I'll put it to some investment fund. Yeah, and that investment grows every month. So you start off with $100 investment, but at the end of the first year, if you save $100 every month, that investment's now worth $1,200 without any growth. That's just the core capital value. That's not even any growth in that. Obviously, it could also fall, but essentially, that spreadsheet could be the foundation from which you grow a lot of your habits. Yeah. So yeah, maybe starting with that spreadsheet would be a good thing.
Wow. And so let's start about budgeting. How can a student create a budget and stick to what they plan for? So say you have your spreadsheet and you have your goals, but it's not easy to just do. I mean, the initial phase of transition is going to be quite difficult. Yeah. So how would you push somebody to get where they are?
So you don't even need to set up a spreadsheet if you don't want to. I mean, there are loads of apps online that help you with this. You go onto the App Store, any App Store, Google App Store, Apple App Store, and you've got budgeting apps, and they're really customizable. They're quite nice. I like Excel only because I think I'm quite old-fashioned with Excel and like control over whatever I put in there. But these apps do the same thing. With these budgeting apps, it's about setting a habit, and it's about being mindful of essentially, okay, I'm going to be honest with myself and go, hey, you know what? This is how much I spend. There's no point lying to yourself when it comes to your finances, only because it'll catch up to you eventually. I think lying to yourself kind of catches up to you about anything, catches up to you eventually. But I think that the mindset shift is very much, or the way in which you actually try to set up these budgets is not that, it is not too far away. It's not too difficult. Anyone can kind of do it. It's just about whether you want to do it in the first instance. Having these apps on you all the time makes it more accessible. And also, I think trying to reduce the amount of effort it takes to use these apps is also quite helpful. I think that there's a lot of psychological literature out there that goes, the minute something gets a bit tougher, or even if I have to, let's say, tap an extra button just to get into an app, you start going, hey, you know what, I don't really want to do that. But I think establishing that habit in the first instance is quite good.
Right. And so what are some ways that, students, you mentioned before that, the example with $100 that you spend on investing, should students jump into investing right now? And are there any tips or advice for students when it comes to, investing their money?
I'm not going to give you any investing tips, only because I think that I'm not qualified to kind of give you any investing tips. But, should people invest? Should people basically try and... So, okay, taking your money and putting it into a bank account is not to an extent safeguarding wealth. You are guaranteeing a certain degree of wealth, but because of inflation, there's always wealth erosion. So you kind of need to think about that, in that, okay, if you put, let's say, $10,000 in your bank account right now, the bank pays you 6 to 7% worth of interest rate. Inflation's at 11%. In net terms, in real terms, you're still losing out year on year wealth. It's great to have liquidity, but to an extent, think about basically, think about the investments. And once again, this has been quite a struggle for me anyway, thinking about investments, because I'm actually really risk averse when it comes to investments. And to an extent, choosing investments, let's say, for example, with individual stocks and shares, or even equity funds, or even, let's say, currency, or even digital assets like Bitcoin, has been actually quite a tough thing. So I think maybe exploring the different assets is viable. There are many things you can kind of invest in. So I mentioned Pokemon cards earlier, and if you can get Pokemon cards, I know I think it was a gold foil Charizard is worth what, $200,000, yeah,
probably around
so something along those lines, but you've got many different types of investments. Obviously moving from Pokemon cards to gold to like precious commodities, they've got different levels of liquidity, different markets, but think about that investment only because I think that at some point in time we all have to kind of consider how to grow our wealth, and it's not part of greed, but it's basically part of planning for what's transpiring in the future. Because if you think about it, you earn $80,000, or rather, if you earn $80,000 or $100,000, or even less than that, $50,000, $20,000 a month, eventually you're going to have to think about buying a house, and that house is going to be, let's say, I don't know what the average house price is in Vietnam, but let's say it's going to be 300,000 Vietnamese, $300,000.
You're actually quite accurate.
Yeah. So let's say it's going to be 300,000 in Ho Chi Minh City, in any one of the districts, and essentially you're earning $20,000 a year, or $30,000, $50,000 a year. You're going to have to think about, where do I get, let's say for instance, the deposit for that house, which is a big lump sum, which you're not going to get at one point in time fully. So you're going to have to plan for that, and the investments actually enable you to kind of deal with that. In terms of, we can kind of maybe have some quick wealth to kind of pay for these, large outflows, but also at the same time, the investments as these assets will also provide a lot of security. If you have kids that want to go to university, you suddenly need, let's say, to pay $90,000 to safeguard, accommodation, housing, and school fees for your child. Yeah, that's got to come from somewhere. So having these elements around the place is just being able to get that liquidity at any one point in time, and once again, it's about having that security. So the investments play a nice role. With that being said, choosing investments is never easy. You've got to think about what you know, what you don't know. There are loads of products out there. There are loads of opportunities out there. I think the digital asset space has been something that's been quite big, but also a lot of people have lost a lot of money in terms of scams in the digital market space. But nothing wrong with traditional assets, gold, silver, yeah.
So it seems to me like a lot of things you've been mentioning, a big part of personal finance and managing your money is pretty much in planning for what you might plan to do later on and thinking about the long-term goals, right? And creating sort of like habits that you can start now as a university student.
Yeah.
But do you also think that these skills would translate into even more success? Let's say, for example, I'm sure a large portion of our audience could be very ambitious students, potentially entrepreneurs. Yeah. Do you think these skills would translate to even more impactful things later on?
Yeah. Personal financial management is something that I think that everyone, would benefit all individuals, regardless of whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're let's say, for example, a blue-collar worker with an office job. The fact that you have paraplanners, individuals that actually do this for a living for other individuals, kind of indicates that the skill is in relatively high demand. Apologies for the vibrations coming in. But yeah, I do think that basically the fact that you are willing to pay individuals to plan your life for you kind of indicates that there is a lot of value in this skill. So think about it. If you're an entrepreneur, you've got, let's say, profits coming in. How do you minimize your tax bill? These strategies will be relatively similar in relation to minimizing your tax bill as an individual. So what tax deductible allowances do you have? Okay, let's say, for example, if you're married in the UK, this used to be the case. If you're married, you can share your allowances, which is pretty cool. Can you do that in Vietnam? Are there those possibilities there? I will caveat this by saying that tax avoidance is basically legal. Tax evasion is illegal, so don't evade taxes, but you can minimize your tax bill if you want to. There are policies in place for that. Okay, but yeah, definitely these skills are infinitely transferable across all realms. The whole planning process as well is also quite nice. The discipline that comes with planning is also quite nice in terms of other facets of your life.
So one last question I have for you in this segment right here is, can you share with us a personal moment where having these knowledge about, having these habits has helped you, and compare that with had you not had these skills, what it would be like?
Well, so I suppose I won't. The main or rather the story that comes to my mind would be not actually for me personally, but for my parents, in terms of being able to pay to fund my education. I think to an extent, so we grew up in a relatively middle class, maybe slightly upper middle class family, and like any upper middle class family, we weren't poor, but nor were we classed as very rich. So liquidity was, we had assets as a family, but liquidity was maybe not great. You would always have to kind of manage that. But I was in my final year of my master's. We're going into my PhD program, and I had an opportunity. Actually, no, I was doing my first year PhD program, and then I had the opportunity to transfer to a really good university to complete my studies, which was pretty awesome. Great opportunity. But obviously, moving from the university that I was currently at to this other university with a really good reputation, fees were going up. It got really expensive, and to an extent, really thankful for my parents for the support and the opportunity. But what they did was fundamentally, so we've got an asset in the form of a house. Okay, we've to an extent paid, let's say, 40 to 50% of the mortgage off. So there's some equity value in this house right now that we own. Let's see if we can kind of let's see if we can kind of use our assets to kind of help fund our son's education. And one of the ways in which you can do this is that you can actually take an asset like a house, and you've taken a mortgage out of it, and whatever you've paid off, you can actually remortgage. The house has value. So that would be kind of a nice like planning based instance whereby you're very mindful of the characteristics of your personal wealth. You're very mindful of what you own, what you don't own, your outgoings, your ingoings, and you can use it to structure a payment for a dependent to kind of further their lives. So that to me would be one really nice example that I could kind of give you guys.
Wow, awesome. Moving on to the next section is about balancing experiences with goals. How do people balance financial goals with their desire for, experiencing experiences, socializing, having fun with friends, and going out on parties on weekend?
I think that's the whole point of setting financial goals, and that you want to have these experiences, and it's not about a balance. It's about basically setting clear targets per se. So if you want to go out with your friends for a night out, and you're going to spend that much, and you want to do that four times a month, then budget for that. I mean, the more you put away, the more your experiences, the more you can kind of play around with your experiences. Like I spoke earlier about traveling, and you can kind of plan around that. If you want to go to America, you want to go to Europe, you want to go to Australia, the experiences are driven by the planning. I mean, if the more, or rather, at least from my perspective, the more you plan, the better you are able to kind of tailor the experience to what you want it to be. So there isn't a disconnect there. It's not a balance. It's basically planning leads into maybe better experiences, at least for me anyway.
Right. Yeah. And what do you think about like incomes? Student finding different alternative ways that can make extra money, such as freelancing, entrepreneurship. Do you encourage this? And if so, what are some things you think are great ways to make extra money?
This is called the side hustle, yeah?
Yes.
So at the core of it, I'm always quite wary of the side hustle. I think that the side hustle's nice, but fundamentally, as students, your objectives are to kind of get an education and basically, progress your life, progress the quality of your life. So the side hustle is great, but you also have to be very mindful that the side hustle is the side hustle. Obviously, if the side hustle does well, then you might think about transitioning from education into the side hustle. But there's a need to kind of think about, once again, planning for the long run and the sustainability of it. I think a lot of side hustles, they're great, but the majority of them anyway tend to be, to an extent, short to medium term. So thinking about whether these side hustles are sustainable is quite important. Whether education, is the more sustainable option, going into the workforce, going into, let's say, for example, having a strong foundation from which to build on. That to me has always been quite valuable. I've always valued the academy and the experiences that have come from the academy quite strongly, but that's just me. Different individuals will speak differently about this in terms of their underlying experiences as well. But if you have a side hustle, that's great. Stuff like, let's say, for example, these virtual businesses are always very easy to kind of set up, but just don't obviously don't do anything illegal, and I have to make that very clear. Don't do anything illegal, but yeah, it's great to kind of maybe these side hustles or these side incomes are great to give an individual a better understanding of what finance is and what the value of money is. You know, you're actually working for this, you're earning for your keep, you're earning your own keep. But at the same time, it's also very easy to go, hey, you know what? I'm going to focus on earning money more than building myself individually from an academic perspective. So yeah, a bit of balance there would be quite important. As in terms of what side hustles that are out there, I really don't know. I mean, you go from crypto trading, which was very, very valuable, which is very profitable. Although at this point in time, I think crypto trading may not be the most profitable thing. You've got GameFi at this point in time, you know, where you can kind of go into these games, play these games, and earn income. Although there are some worries around extensive gamification and the impact that it has on individuals, on the livelihood of individuals. So, you know, you become a bit of you're too focused on games. I think that's an issue that's quite endemic in countries like Japan, or you're too endemic, so you lose that social connection to society, which is quite worrying. But you also have more traditional, let's say, for instance, let's say logistics. I was talking to one of the students at RMIT the other day, and he had a side business, which was he ran in tandem with his time at university, whereby he would organize the movement of vegetables from farms into the city center, which was pretty cool. I mean that was actually a really nice talk about organization of, okay, I need to get this driver here at that point in time. I need to organize for that driver to drop it off at this marketplace. So there's a lot of nice planning there, and it's nice to kind of see that use of the skills that the students have picked up from university and apply it whilst they're still at university. So it's really cool stuff there.
Right. I think I definitely agree with that. It's because, like, the reason why I like to ask that question is because a lot of students that I notice in my environment and my friends, they tend to like pick up a lot of different side hustles that I think it comes down to it. It's opportunity costs in terms of, you know, your academics or making a quick buck for, you know, something for the weekend. But I would agree with the sense that, you know, if you're doing something that's related with your academics as well, it's a great opportunity for you to apply what you're learning.
Definitely. I mean, like, once again, maybe here is more of a question of balance. I think there's nothing wrong in pursuing, let's say, for example, an income stream. I think that's great developmental wise, but once again, it also has to be in keeping with your objectives. I mean, you know, if you want to finish university and you want to get a degree and your side hustle takes up too much of your time, then you need to kind of think about that. Or if you want to progress into your side hustle and whether your university life is taking too much of your time with the side hustle, where you want to make your side hustle your main hustle, then you know, it's very much objective alignment. By the core of it, it's nice to kind of see, like you say, implementation of knowledge in a field, and it's always nice when you kind of see individuals kind of like you know, using the knowledge that they've acquired. There is also a dark side to the side hustle, but yeah, it's something that we have to manage.
Gotcha. So the next part I want to ask you about is overcoming financial obstacles and kind of building resilience, right? So how can we overcome obstacles such as unexpected expense that might arise, or let's say you lost your job and then you have major expense that you have to cover in short amount of time?
So these large events like losing your jobs, like job loss, is always difficult to take psychologically. To an extent, I think this is what financial planning is about as well, or financial management is about as well. It's about basically planning for a rainy day, or if you're Nassim Taleb, planning for a black swan event, you know. So COVID hits, suddenly you're no longer required in the workforce. You get, you know, you get redundancy, you get made redundant. So what do I do now? And at the core of it, the underlying, I suppose, objective here with financial planning is not too dissimilar for the individual and also for the corporation, in that you want to have at least a base level of wealth that's able to safeguard you over a span of time. So that wealth won't be able to sustain you for the rest of your life, because if you're still relatively young, there's a long way of life to go. But you would hope that fundamentally that base level of wealth that you've built up for the rainy day would be able to, let's say, safeguard you for a period of time that enables you some flexibility to seek either training or alternative employment. So these black swan events, or these, you know, shocks, is what financial planning is about as well. You need to kind of factor in your rainy day funds. On the other hand, if you have an unexpected expense, I suppose that depending upon what expenses and my understanding of expense, or my interpretation of expense is that, it's a short, small liquidity requirement. My motorcycle is broken down. I need to change this part in there. It's costing more than I budgeted for this month. And that's a bit of liquidity management. And to an extent, I think having spare liquidity is also quite important. And that's a trade-off as well. And that's one of the main questions that we have to ask ourselves with any form of financial planning. I need to keep cash, or that I should have some cash on me. But I know that if I keep cash, then I don't have wealth generation. I don't have growth. I don't have investments. So how much cash do I keep? How much how much investments do I keep? That's a question that's idiosyncratic to the individual. That there is no fixed profile in terms of, we keep 20% cash, 80% investments. I think that keeping all cash, although I think that keeping all cash may not be the best solution. But at the same time, what investments are there out there? Are they too risky for your personal risk profile? That will be dependent. But yeah, I think these are the decisions that you will have to take when it comes to overcoming these financial obstacles. So one would be wealth, because transition of that wealth into safeguarding, let's say, your rainy days or your shocks or your black swan events. That's great. And also liquidity. How much do you keep for your unexpected expenses?
Right. So when it comes down to it, personal finance and financial planning isn't just for the fun stuff. It's also risk management for things that might come up unexpectedly, right?
Definitely. I mean, risk management is not a concept that's unique to finance. I think risk management is a concept that we always have to factor in. I mean, we speak about opportunity costs. We speak about risks in finance and economics, and to an extent, that's what this is. It'll be part of personal wealth management as well, because at any one point in time, you're trying to assess the opportunity cost of a particular decision, and you're going to have to bear that opportunity cost. You're going to have to deal with it. And obviously also in relation to personal wealth management, you're trying to deal with risk. Although with personal wealth management, there are elements whereby there won't be risks. For example, life assurance. So that someday, I know that within the Asian culture we don't like talking about death. So this is a question that this is a topic that is only spoken of behind closed doors a lot of the time. But maybe you can have a conversation about this. But we're going to plan for our death. We're all eventually going to die someday, and to an extent, what happens upon our death? Are we going to leave our dependents with a large bill, large expenses, or large liabilities? Or do you want to plan for them to basically have a good life going forth, have assets? So yeah, thinking about inheritance is also quite an important thing, because, and I don't know how it is in the UK, but I don't know how it is in Vietnam, but in the UK we have something called inheritance tax. So if you leave, or if you have loads of assets and you leave that to like your family, your kids, your grandkids, they actually have to pay tax on it before they get to claim your inheritance. So you need to think about, how do I make sure that the bill is as cheap as possible so that they get their inheritance? Or are there any alternatives to this? We have to plan for that. So yeah, there's also that planning.
Right. So to kind of wrap everything that you've been saying in terms of like what mindset people should have, how can a mindset affect a person's financial success? And what exactly, if you can categorize it in a few key words, mindset that you should have when it comes to managing your money? What would it be?
That's a difficult question, only because there's so many different ways of managing money. Some people are really good with money. Some people aren't good with money. You can't be too stingy with your money as well, because you kind of have to let your money go. You can't be too risk averse. It's actually quite a difficult one. But I suppose with the mindset, I think the main thing would be actually like most habits, or trying to develop a habit in terms of being mindful about a particular element of life. I think that being disciplined could help. So actually taking responsibility for your financial planning and going, hey, you know what? I actually have to do this myself. Or if I don't have to do this myself, then I actually have to basically take responsibility and pay someone to kind of manage my funds for me. And I think that the discipline element is always quite important with money, only because I think it's one. Yeah. So I think I'll put that as the key mindset. I think being very disciplined would be very helpful when it comes to financial management.
Gotcha. And from your perspective, what are some common money beliefs that can hinder financial success?
Money beliefs that can hinder financial success.
I think we've reached the very challenging
part.
I know.
So I think believing that liquidity is everything, or believing that money, as in holding cash, is the be all and end all for financial planning. I mean, obviously, don't get me wrong, having cash and having that large bank balance is always nice, but know that having that cash in your bank account is that, it's there, it's wealth, but potentially maybe thinking about whether it can do more for yourself. I learned that relatively late in life, in that, I like looking at my bank balance going, there's a lot of money in there, it's nice. Or relatively a lot of money for me anyway. It might not be a lot for others, but looking at that bank balance and going, hey, you know what? It's a nice amount, but also thinking, can it do more for me? I think that's maybe one of the beliefs that we can kind of train ourselves to kind of be very careful with. That'll be something.
Gotcha. And now we've come to this question that you are. This is gonna be a difficult one for you. How can students cultivate a positive money mindset? Very exciting one.
I don't know what a positive money mindset is. So you see money positively, or you don't. I don't know. I mean, is this whereby? So. What is a positive money mindset? So if you're going. And I'm gonna we'll try and decompose this. I think it'll be a nice exercise trying to break down what a positive money mindset is. So, is a positive money mindset that you view money positively, in that having money is not a bad thing, in that it's okay to have wealth? Is that what a positive money mindset is? Or is a positive money mindset or does a positive money mindset mean that you're not afraid to utilize money? You're not afraid to basically take money and make it work for you? Is that a positive money mindset?
Let's go with the latter.
So you're not afraid to take money and use it and utilize it? I suppose. Okay, actually, that's a good point. Let's kind of take a positive money mindset. Let's define a positive money mindset as understanding what money can do for you, and also understanding the value of money. Let's go with that. Yeah, let's go with that. Only because I think that having only the belief of what money can do for you can be quite dangerous, because you then go, oh, this is what money is all about, when in actuality it actually isn't. But let's kind of take the positive money mindset as an understanding of the value of money, an understanding of where money comes from. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot to earn. There's a lot of, there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into earning money. So to an extent, you should have a value, or you should understand the true value of where this comes from. In which case, then, understanding the effort that goes into earning money means that going forward, you'll be more cognizant and you'll be more conscientious about how you actually spend it. So I think that's an important thing, in that you then have that effort value generation connection there. So I think that's a great message to kind of put forth, going, yes, money is great. It's good to have money. It's good to also know what money can kind of do for you. It's good to know the value of money. It's good to know the effort that goes into it, and I think trying to cultivate that within individuals is it'll be great. Yeah. So let's put a nice positive message out there, and that let's understand the value of money and the effort that goes into it, and let's value it going forward.
Awesome. Yeah. So now we're gonna move to some of the questions that some of our members in the club, as well as some students at school, have for you. The first one is actually by somebody that you're very familiar with, Sung Lei. He said, many Gen Z have said that play when we are young, no need to save a lot of money, you can work. So as a result, Gen Z tend to spend a lot of money spontaneously. They would rather choose what they like at the moment than invest in longer term. What do you think about that? Personal interest at the moment or long-term investment?
Oh, So I'm not Gen Z, so I think I'm millennial, if I'm not mistaken. So
Right.
so technically I'm longer term focused, but no, I think that it's quite difficult for me to kind of impose my paradigm on the evolving paradigm of society. So basically, Gen Z sees things very differently from how I see things, from how my parents saw things. And that's great. That's good. There are obviously elements in there whereby, you know, we need to conserve. There are belief systems, value systems that don't change, that maybe we can argue that they could be developed and carried forward. Okay, that's perfectly fine. But I think this whole idea of Gen Z spends spontaneously, maybe you do. I think there are more opportunities for Gen Z to spend spontaneously. You want to buy Bitcoin, just click on your Binance wallet and go, hey, I'll get Bitcoin instantaneously. It's in your account. Back in the day when my parents wanted to buy something, they actually had to go to a physical place and buy something. So you didn't have the opportunities to spend spontaneously. So given these opportunities, you're going to take them. But with that being said, yeah, I think the fact that, potentially the fact that you can spend spontaneously means that also you can save spontaneously. It's very easy for you to put money away instantaneously. And we have to kind of give Gen Z that credit that, okay, they spend spontaneously. We see money going out, but we also potentially maybe have a subset of Gen Z, or a big subset of Gen Z, that go, I'm going to save instantaneously. The minute my salary gets into my account, I'm putting away $500 into a savings account. That could also happen. We don't know. But so long as they're mindful of their wealth planning, I think, yeah, there are loads of apps out there. Also, you need to think about the spontaneity in that information about spending and information about wealth management is so readily available at this point in time that you go online, you've got these budgeting apps, you've got these apps that tell you if you're exceeding, these apps are really cool because they gamify the whole saving experience. Oh, congratulations, you've saved 5 months in a row. Here's a badge. You compete socially with your friends. That's a cool part. And yeah, we have to see the good and the bad with you, or not the good and the bad, but you have to see both sides in that. Yes, there's spontaneous spending, but I would assume as well that there would also be quite a good amount of spontaneous saving as well.
Gotcha. And one last question we have is actually from one of my close friends, Eric, is how can I negotiate my salary when I graduate, getting my first job?
Hi, Eric. That's a good question. Okay, so maybe you could do a shout out, Eric. Hi, Eric. Thanks for that question. How do you negotiate? So negotiation is actually quite a unique skill, and it's something that can be trained, depending upon who you speak to. So psychologists will always argue that when it goes to negotiation, you have to possess one key personality trait, and that's disagreeability. So you cannot be an agreeable person if you want to negotiate, because if you're an agreeable person, you go, hey, we'll give you $2,000 a month. Fine, I'll take it. That's not negotiation, but you have to be disagreeable, and to an extent, not everyone's disagreeable, by the way. So it may not be your dominant personality trait, but disagreeability has quite a good strong relationship to career earnings. So yeah, that's quite a cool one. The other thing when it comes to negotiation is you have to negotiate from a position of, you have to have some reason and some support for your negotiation. You can't go in there going, hey, I'm a fresh graduate. I just graduated RMIT. I scored a HD in my degree. I want a CEO's pay. You have to come from a position of going, hey, you know what? What's reasonable? What can I push for? And it has to be backed up. So you have to have some support for your negotiation. Yeah. You can't just go in there and just go, hey, I want this. No one's ever going to listen to you that way. Yeah.
Awesome. And last, to kind of wrap up this episode, in your opinion, what is the biggest key takeaway that our listeners here should take from this episode? If you could give them just a few final takeaways.
I think I like where we went with that definition for positive money mindset. I think that hopefully from listening to this, that whoever's listening to this, you'll understand the value of money. You'll now see what your parents have had to do, have had to sacrifice to kind of get where they are. Hopefully you'll take that understanding, and or not even your parents, but whoever tries to earn a living. You'll understand the value that goes into that acquisition of money, and we always see like money acquisition as greed, or we only picture it one way, in that we see it as, oh, that investment banker or that Fortune 500 CEO having taken home a commission of $600 million a year. But that's a very small proportion. And even then, if you think about the CEOs, they are a very small proportion of individuals that are willing to sacrifice a lot. They're working 80-hour week. Could you imagine working an 80-hour week? That's just insane. That's like 7 days. Sorry, that's like at least 20 hours a day, and they're willing to give that up to kind of get those jobs. But even then, trying to understand the value that goes into generating wealth, and not treating it as a negative element. It's just safeguarding. It's trying to provide for your family. It's trying to provide for your dependents. It's trying to basically live. So trying to have that positive outlook on what money actually is, and the whole idea of financial planning. Hopefully that's the key takeaway from this.
Awesome. Thank you. And that pretty much wraps up our episode. Thank you to our listener for tuning in with our InfinitTech Podcast Series. Hopefully through today's episode, you learned quite a bit about managing your own money, personal finance, financial literacy with Dr. Seng. And that's it for today. I'll see you guys next time.
Shout out Fintech Club.